Welcome back to the weekly edit. It's been a little while. This week I'll be editing in DxO PhotoLab 9. I actually had to go and review some of the previous weekly edits just to sort of remind myself how I actually do these things. So this week, like I mentioned, DxO PhotoLab 9. The particular image for this week was captured on the island of Corfu in Greece while on holiday with the family. And the camera I used was a Panasonic FZ1002. Now, don't panic if you don't know that camera. It's not some new fancy AI toy. It's actually quite an old camera, a bridge camera to be specific. So no interchangeable lenses. It's got one lens built in, and you can zoom from 24 millimeters, 35 millimeter equivalent right out to, or full frame equivalent right through to, I think this particular one is 400 millimeters. So great camera to take on holiday. Image quality is perfectly fine, especially for online use. You can make up prints up to, I think I have like A2 prints hanging in our house from this particular camera. So yeah, really not an issue in terms of image quality, unless you're looking to do like billboard size prints. And even then, billboards don't actually require that much DPI, but that's actually a completely different topic, completely different video, completely different thought process. Let's not get too distracted here. So yeah, before we jump into the edit, like always, and if you've watched any of my previous weekly edits, I always start off with envisioning what I want to do with the edit. And previously I called this my thought process for the edit. This has sort of evolved into what I call the vision for the edit, or if you go down into the description, you'll see a guide I made called Envision the Edit. And this has sort of evolved over time as I did these weekly edits into that particular guide. So you can grab that, it's for free, down in the description. So let's look at the image quickly. And the image on the screen here was actually the scene in front of me as I went for an early morning walk while everyone was still waking up. And as I saw the scene, I thought it's a beautiful early morning classic Greek island scene. Boats be anchored off the shore, waiting for the people to head out for the day. But then as I looked at the scene specifically, I realized that it has so much more potential. And this is where in Envision the Edit, I talk about envisioning first what you want to capture and how you want to capture it before actually picking up the camera. See it in your mind's eye, and knowing what your camera is capable of, you can envision, in other words. Sorry, I know I'm repeating that a lot. What you want to see in the final result. And then once we get into the edit, like here, first before you capture the frame, you envision what you want to capture, how you want to capture it. Then you pick up the camera, you know already what settings you want to use, and then you capture that frame. Then when you get into your editing software, you envision what you want the final result to look like from the raw file. So again, two envision processes. One before you actually capture the frame, and one before you do the edit. Reason being is that if you don't have a vision in your mind of what you want to capture, when you pick up the camera, you don't know, am I going to do 1/15 of a second at f5.6 or f11, and ISO 200, or so likewise when you get into the edit, am I going to do, you're just looking at the image. If you know what the final result, or more or less what the final result should look like, you already know what you're going to do. Are you going to adjust exposure? Are you going to do the tone curve? Do you need color calibration? Are you going to do some split toning? Do you want to make use of masks? All those things. Whereas if you don't have that vision, you get into the editing program and you're just pulling sliders back and forth. It takes you much longer. You don't always get satisfactory results. Another big plus of having a vision for the edit is actually spending much less time editing, because you know when you're finished. If you don't know what you want to achieve with the edit, you don't really know when you're finished, so you just end up going back and forth a lot of the time. So I think I've spoken enough. So that's sort of the gist here. So looking at this image, what I wanted to actually originally say before I got sidetracked is this was a scene. And then when I looked at the scene, I thought, well, if I use a slower shutter speed, this can look completely different, actually be quite a captivating frame, at least for me, in my mind. So let me just scroll through them, and you can see what I ended up getting. So then I started playing with slower shutter speeds and just handheld panning through the scene. Why didn't that move? Do I need to click on my program here? Okay, yeah, I need to do that. So that is one of the initial next frames. On the left, they're a little bit close to the one boat's a little bit close to the edge of the frame, so I carried on panning. And this is actually the frame I settled on, because the three boats, you can still make out their boats, but there's this motion. It's a bit abstract, but it's still sort of anchored in reality. And then I played around a bit more. That was a slightly faster shutter speed. That was, what was that? So 1/8 of a second. This was also 1/8 actually. So I probably just panned faster with my hands actually. And then I was sort of still playing around. So you get the gist of it. So let's just go back to the frame that I eventually settled on. So yeah, so that was the vision I had in my mind. I captured the image, and now we're in the editing software. So let's do the edit in PhotoLab 9. So double click on the image, head into the Customize tab. Now, immediately getting back, I promise we'll start the edit shortly. All I want to do here specifically is I want to enhance the colors. Let me just show you on screen actually. So the great thing about DxO, sorry, and I'm talking all over the place. The great thing about DxO is it actually also allows me to do a lot less editing. Let me show you what I mean. It already applies a lot of default smart edits without you having to do anything. And you can customize this inside the settings of the program. So if we look at the actual raw file, I'm going to come up here to compare. It's like a before after. All I'm going to do is click on that. So keep an eye on the image here. So this is sort of default DxO edits applied. I click on compare or before. So here we go. That's the original raw file. Very flat, very little contrast. You can see there's potential there for color, with the colors, and also what I saw when I was there on location. And when I let go, you can see already it's actually quite far along. So not much I want to do here. Not much at all. I just want to enhance the colors in the sky, get a bit of contrast, and enhance the highlights in the water, and maybe do some noise reduction. If we zoom into 100% here, this camera specifically, the correction preview, there we go. It's not too noisy. There's a bit of noise, but it's not a bad thing. But we can work on that a little bit here in the shadow areas, and enhance the blues in the water, and that's pretty much that. And straighten the horizon. So again, because I know what I want the final image to look like, I don't have to do a lot and spend hours tweaking things back and forth. So let me stop talking and get started. So first things first, I want to straighten the horizon here, and then grab the horizon straightening tool. Now immediately that activates, and all we have to do is drag this line along the horizon like so. Maybe a little more up, click apply, and there we go, straightened horizon. And it keeps the crop constrained automatically. Otherwise, so we get close. Otherwise, if it didn't, we can just come up with the crop tool and finish off the crop like that. Okay, great. So from there, I'm going to move into the light section here from DxO. Now exposure, my keyboard to the right here. I'm going to activate exposure, even though I don't think it needs much adjustment. And then in DxO here, the sliders in DxO are a little bit, what's the word? Finicky, not ideal. When you drag them left and right, they make quite big adjustments with small moves. So what I tend to do actually is either just use the up and down arrows, or use my keyboard up and down arrows. So here, all I want to do is just maybe like a 0.2 increase, just like that. So we have a quick look before, after. Sorry. And then one thing in DxO is the smart lighting. If you just deactivate that, you can see immediately it gets to a lot more of a flat image. And here it just does it almost brings just the highlights and the shadows more into range. So that's quite a nice little default adjustment that it does. And then selective tone would be the highlights, midtone, shadows. Again here, now shadows specifically, I'll actually make a video about that. And DxO is not the most pleasing adjustment to actually use the tone curve if you do want to do shadows. So let's just undo that. But here already, let's just go before, after. And again, I didn't have to do anything. DxO did this automatically. Don't have to do any adjustments. And then clear view plus, it's like a little micro contrast adjustments. Let's just do it before, after. Again, I don't want to do much more there. Contrast, already applied a little bit of contrast, tiny amount. I don't think I want to add more. Maybe let's go, it's on 10, maybe let's go to 20. and then have a look at the before, after. Perfect. Then with the tone curve, I'm actually going to leave it alone for now. It's already corrected vignetting. Then we go into color. White balance for me here looks pretty good. I might cool it down slightly. We can choose, or we can actually, I'm just going to, it's on 8,000, take it down to about 7.5, or maybe not all the way, let's do 7.750. There we go. Okay, and then this is just the rendering profile. You can play around with this if you want. Camera body, color positive. I tend to leave it on generic rendering, and you can go through different hover and different renderings here. Sometimes the camera body can be quite nice with DxO vibrant. In this case, I'm going to leave it on default. There's a lot of settings you can play around with here. What I do like to do sometimes is you can actually apply a LUT. So you can there's some standard LUTs built in. Now I know this looks over the top, but I actually just like to hover over these and see specifically how they affect the highlights and the shadows. Like this golden beauty is actually adding a nice bit of orange, and then a little bit of teal to the shadows. Old Magazine, ooh, that's actually looking very nice. Old Sicily, also not bad. We were actually quite close to Italy. Pastel Shift, I think, ooh, that's also got a nice twilight. And the reason I do this is, let's just go with Old Magazine. So you can see before, after, it's doing some nice things in the sky. And then with intensity, which is like opacity, I just take that all the way down to 0, and then I just bring it back in just to have that, just a slight effect which I originally wanted. Before, after. So I like what it's doing here in this band of sky with the sunrise colors. Okay, so that's that. And then we can also do some split toning. If you like, you can do some simple toning, or you come to split toning, and you can differentiate between highlights and shadows. Here, what I do is similar to with the LUT grading. So with highlights, I actually look at, you can hover over the default here, but I look at specifically what it's doing to the highlights. Sepia gold's not bad. I'm looking for something a little bit more pinky, magenta-y. So I'm going to go more or less, or orangey magenta-y, like there. And I'm going to leave the intensity on 100, because then I'm going to come to shadows. And now I'm going to look at, I'm looking for something that's also like blue or cold, but not too cold. This ferric sulfide might be nice. Now, I know this is looking over the top. So then I take intensity for both the highlights and the shadows completely down. And then I just bring it in ever so slightly. Like, I mean, not a lot. I'm doing like 10, 15 here. So if we just look at highlights, that's before, after, and then shadows, also just a little bit. And then we can actually slide the balance here towards the shadows or towards the highlights. I'm going to leave that in the middle though. Okay, so that's before split toning, after split toning. Very nice. Okay, and then color overall. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I'm actually going to leave the shadows alone here in the split toning. So getting back to color, overall, I do want to enhance the colors. Now in DxO, vibrancy has a very subtle effect. So if you push that up, you can sort of see that. I'm almost at 70% already. And if we look at saturation, which has a much more intense effect. So I play around with both, even though in other programs like Lightroom, I'll avoid saturation like the plague. So that was before the color adjustment, that was after. And again, I'm looking at bringing out these beautiful oranges and blues in the sky, and then the highlights and blues in the water. And that is that actually for the color. So then if we come to sharpening and denoising, now with DxO, it already has adjusted lens sharpness optimization. So if we zoom in here, we go to the boat. Let's deactivate that. So keep an eye here on the boat. I know this is a pan, or not this is a sharp scene, but it's been panned, so it's not sharp, if you know what I mean. So lens sharpness, if we toggle that off, have a look at what it does under the boat. It's become fuzzy. And this is what DxO does by default. This is sort of what you would have done in Pure Raw, if you need to process your image in Pure Raw and then come into DxO to another program. It's automatically applied in DxO, which is great. Really pulls a lot out of your lenses, old or new. And now I zoomed out, but I want to zoom back in because we want to do some noise reduction. And this is your noise reduction engine here. We have standard, DeepPRIME, and then the newest version, DeepPRIME XD2s. So I'm going to click on that. And now you're going to tell me, but nothing happened. And you'd be correct, because I don't know why in DxO they don't show the 100% preview on the whole image. You actually have to select a specific tool for this, which is at the top here in the middle, called the loop tool. You click on that, and then it brings up a little preview you can drag onto the part of the image where you want to see the denoising effect. So here you can see completely noise free, whereas to the right, quite a bit of noise. You can also enlarge this by clicking on this little white square here. So then you have a nice little, much bigger preview. So that to me is great. That's pretty noiseless. And I'm going to deactivate the loop tool, and I'm going to leave it on that, knowing that the image is going to export noise free. And then there's retouch here. If there were any blemishes, we'd want to remove. In this case, there's not really. And just when I zoomed in there, I think going back to color, I might actually, it's not split toning, LUTs. That's actually there by default, those reflections above the boat. So going back to split toning here. I'm going to push that more towards the shadows, just a tad. Okay, moving on. So noise reduction we've done, geometry, not worrying about anything here. You can have a look about distortion on the lens there. Automatically applied again, which is great. And then we can apply effects from blurs to grain to creative vignetting, frames, etc. Not a topic for this to edit. Might add a little bit of grain. So if we look at the image here, if we bring up the noise reduction, and then we can see what effect we're having with the grain. Just a tad. Actually, no, I'm going to leave that alone. It's complicating things unnecessarily. And then in the local adjustments or masking panel, all I want to do before we do that, actually, let's have a look at the before, after. So we've come a long way. Before I do the local adjustments, let's just quickly recap. So we had the raw image, open it up in DxO. There were some default edits DxO applied automatically, which left me without a lot to do. And because I already knew what I wanted the final image to look like, I didn't have to do a lot, or I knew what I was going to do, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And all I want to do here actually is just you make use of two graduated filters. And I know it's got some AI masking and all the fancy stuff. I tend to be quite basic in my editing requirements. So I'm going to do one graduated filter on the water here. And all I want to do here is actually increase the highlights to bring them out a little bit. And then actually cool down the water. Just like that. So then we're going to close that. And if we look at before and after. Great stuff. Just brought out those highlights in the water a little bit. Then I'm going to add a new mask, and it's also going to be a linear gradient for the sky. Fortunately, with the ocean, easy in terms of mask application. And here I want to actually bring in a little bit of the clear view plus, just a tad, and then what I'm going to do here is some vibrancy, just for that subtle effect. No, that's too much. And then I'm going to close. And then if we have a look at the before, after, very subtle effect, but just a little extra bit of color pop in the sky. And I think that is going to be that. or maybe not. Last adjustment, I promise. I'm going to use a control point. Actually, let me just see, new mask, control point, and I'm going to do it on the boats. That one's going to be a bit smaller, and that one's going to be a bit bigger on that boat. I'm going to adjust the luma so that it's a bit more targeted on the brighter colors of the boat. And what I'm going to do here is actually use the midtones just to bring up the brightness on the boat a little bit. And the highlights maybe a tad. And the shadows then, seeing it's not having that much of an effect. Trial and error as we go along. Okay, so let's close that out. And then specifically with the control points, let's have a look at the before and after. I am going to, it's a bit much, so fortunately we have a opacity slider here, so I'm going to take that down all the way. And this is going to correct the preview, and then I'm probably going to take it to about 50%, and then have a look at the before and the after. Perfect. Okay, so that's the edit. Let's quickly look at the before after one more time. So that's the original raw file, and that is the final edit. Pretty good. And yeah, again, not a massive amount of adjustments. Most of the time I spent me explaining what I'm doing, so apologies for the slightly longer time frame, but DxO is quite an extensive program. There are a lot of options. If you would like me to make a bit more detailed videos on specific features, let me know down in the comments. But anyway, yeah, this was great to do a weekly edit again after such a long time. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you thought. Any questions, drop them in the comments. Shoot me a DM or a direct message, as they say. All the online people who know what they're doing sound fancy when they say that. Anyway, carry on, shall we? Let's get out there and make some images so we can come back and do some more editing. I'll see you in the next one.